Hi, it's Kat Diva here from the Eden Room, and welcome to our event today on the Metaphysical Midlife, Preparing for Power with Midlife Mentor Debs de Vries. And I'm so happy to welcome you, Debs. Thank you for being here with us. We just had a little snafu on Facebook, so we've moved on to this platform with maybe some women joining us, and maybe not, because it was all a bit of a tricky moment. But we had some questions coming in, and I know this is a subject that actually has a lot of fear and stigma and presents a lot of challenges for women. And I'm so grateful that you're taking the time today to speak us through how you perceive midlife and aging and the menopause and how you approach it, because I just think it's a conversation we so sorely need to be having. So let's just pass you the mic, Debs. I love listening to you. I could listen to you all day, and then I'll chip in as we go. Let's talk about what are some of the problems and the situation as you're seeing it right now for women, and then we'll go from there.
My view, and thank you, Kat. Don't listen to me all day. I'll be unstoppable. Menopause and the view that I see is that we're still, I believe, quite stuck in a cultural bubble around what menopause is and what that means to women and their livelihoods, their romances, their future. And where that's taken us, from my viewpoint, and I'll fess up now, I'm 64, so I've been watching the development of the women's movement since 1973, when I bought my first Cosmopolitan, and it was issue 1, and all the things that went around it. So although it's only one view, it is a view that I've been absorbing and playing with for a long time. So going back to that, we seem to still be stuck in a bubble where menopause is essentially wrong. It's a bad deal. And the solution to this wrong and this bad deal is to offer us alternative ways to continue to remain in some kind of stasis as best we can, to maintain the peak of our greatness, to maintain our health, to maintain our estrogen, to maintain our bone density. There is something wrong, essentially, with menopause. And even 2 or 3 years ago, I made a complaint because the Trading Standards, not the Trading Standards Authority, an authority that I've forgotten about, started to try to call menopause an illness.
Wow.
Now, that language is dangerous, because once you classify it as an illness, then of course it opens up the door to a huge amount more pharmaceutical intervention than we have now. You label it, you remind women that there is again something wrong with their functions. You know, we can talk about menstruation, and we would do. We can talk about pregnancy, and that's moving out of the shadows. But there's still an interruption to the manufacturing, the productive nature of a being. And I see that as being quite industrial revolution. I see that as starting at the point when we started to particularly look at women as units of production, because they were moving into factories. On the land, it was different. A man was a unit of production and a woman was doing what she was doing, but she wasn't paid, she wasn't equated in the same way. But where I see a big shift is when women started to come into the factories, and you're just a body. And that body is paid X amount for the amount of labor that it returns. How does that work with a woman's body? It doesn't. If you were to be a unit of production, you do not want 5 or 6 days off where you're not producing, or 7 or 8 months, or you don't want to hit menopause or perimenopause, which is where I love to work, where effectively you need to kind of can all the noise for a while. You need to start thinking about structuring your life in a more strategic way for yourself, for those coming forward that now are going to start to step into your shoes. You're apprenticing another generation. You're preparing your children, your partner, if he hasn't been well prepared or she hasn't been well prepared, now's the time to do it, to start to pick up the tasks that you've been carrying, the roles that you've been carrying. And then you enter a phase where you lose your identity as some of those role-based things. Whilst the new you, which is embryonic and has always been there, is now within its own cocoon fetus stage, but you've got to set the platform, the support systems, the structures in place so that when that new you emerges, and there's no timeline on this, but you know, we could give it a period of time and that'd be okay. You are in a great place to step forward rather than trying to hang on to what you already have, which actually, as you feel into it energetically, is already becoming heavy. And an example of that, to leave the cultural side at the moment, a client might say to me, but I haven't got any support. How do I get these things done? And I say, you've got 2 teenage children. You know, it's right under your nose sometimes. It's absolutely right under your nose. So the picture I see is that we are not working with the natural progress of nature. We are saying that by midlife, you need to keep hanging on to that because, hey, guess what, lady? You've got another 20 years of working life. How are you going to get your dreams? How are you going to achieve that XYZ thing?
Yeah.
If you don't maintain this, because guess what? This is perfection. This is nirvana. This is as good as it gets for you. So let us offer you the ways of maintaining your estrogen and maintaining your youthfulness.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, menopause is telling you that you've come to the end of your fertile years, your reproductive years, and therefore, some view culturally, your value is now dropping.
Yeah. It's sorry, I've got somebody trying to get into our Zoom set, Deb. So if I seem a bit distant, that's why. I'm just letting Becky know it's posted on the thread. So this is really important to me because I'm probably one of your women, you're a mentor to women in midlife, and you talk about these women being unstoppable women, women who have these big dreams, women who have, you know, really probably, for me, I'd say I've been working for myself for 11 years. Well, much longer actually, but in business properly, what I would say properly. Through my 20s, I really wanted to discover my purpose. I knew I was here for a reason. And that was I wasn't chasing a man in my 20s or a career. I was really hungry for my purpose, you know, in a deep way. And it was a kind of like an awakening in my early 20s that led me to that. But then my 30s have been spent having children, but also very much my business has been a child to me. It's been something I've treasured and nurtured and had a wonderful time along the way meeting women and really enjoying my own growth and that journey. But now I'm really humbled as I approach 40 with really recognizing this penny has dropped for me of going, oh, it doesn't get easier. The challenges are going to keep coming. And one of my clients who's very experienced, lovely lady in her, I guess, I don't know what her age she is actually, but I'm guessing mid-50s, who teaches Tantra, she talks about the menopause like a wave. Lovely Becky, she talks about this wave coming to you, and that wave is coming, and whether we like it or not, you called it a tsunami, and we either get knocked over by that wave or we learn how to ride that wave and how to navigate that gracefully, which is what totally a word I would associate with you. And so what is it that we women in midlife, who you call us unstoppable, what is it that we need to know about the perimenopause? Because for many of us, I think it feels like it's going to stop us in our tracks.
Yes. Yes.
And it's scary.
That's when the fear kicks in because you've been used to being unstoppable. And for many women, and I actually think it impacts unstoppable women more psychologically, because they are still focused ahead. They've still got that dynamism going. They're the kind of women who really want to make their whole life count. And that's absolutely no judgment on anybody who doesn't feel like that. But for some people, the shock, if you like, the psychic shock isn't as great because they were accepting it. It doesn't have to apply to them like that, but they were ready for it. They see that as the beginning of the wind down. The ladies I work with, they're not ready to accept that. So in a sense, they're more in shock. They're trying to move forward. They're trying to move forward and it's not working. It's not working. What is this invisible force pushing me back? So you ask the question, what do we need to do to prepare? I I feel the first thing is to examine your mindset and to really tune into those senses and feelings and not push past them or try to find a way to push on harder, but to ask yourself, if nature, which is busy creating everything and works in spirals and cycles and seasons, and if I am part of nature, which I am, why would nature want me to feel like this? Is that a cruelty? Is it some kind of punishment? Does she actually want us to go, well, I don't care how unstoppable, I don't care how much you want to change the world, Kat, you're done. You've had your babies, or you've had your business, or you've produced something. I'm just going to chuck you away like an old Kleenex. And that was a question that had come to my mind 30 or 40 years before, because my mother died when she was 51, and there was a great deal for me around asking those questions. And nature eventually answered that. And she said, I want you to go in the world and tell women that is not the agenda. That's not what's happening. Effectively, she's sending you a new upward surge. She, the universe, what does it do? Have a look. It increases, it expands, but it doesn't do it in a linear fashion. So, given that we are representatives of the divine feminine aspect of our energy, doesn't it make sense that when we approach the great gateways of our lives, menstruation, conception, pregnancy, and menopause, that we see it as a gateway? There's something going on here. There's something going on here. And I think even just having that curiosity and asking yourself that question and getting very real with yourself and say, if I wasn't scared, if I didn't have to push and I went and looked out of my window, could I get some reassurance that this isn't the end? And part of what I've always said is if I can provide that reassurance from a perspective of having traveled the journey, from a perspective of not, although I've been pulled there, not taking some of the routes that were offered to me to help me stay where I was. I didn't, as it turns out, Kat, I didn't need to stay where I was because there was something more available to me. So the preparation would be to start asking yourselves those bigger questions. And another preparation that I often do, and I have an exercise around it, which is, I think it's quite cool, is to actually sit down and write a list of where your energy is going. You know, you don't need to get beyond that. You need to start to look at the land that you've created, the territory you're working in right now. Step out of the roles that you've assigned to yourself and say, where is my energy going? Am I still trying to do as much as and more? Would I give that, if I was an employer, would I give that job to somebody else? Would I give all my roles to another individual? Very often the answer is that would be a pretty mean employer. So there are things that you can do right now to start weaning off you that has been weaned onto you. In different little ways, big ways, you start to prepare the family, you start to prepare your lovers, you start to prepare your workplace for your transition, so that as you go inwards, and that's something we can talk about a long time, and what that really can feel like and why it's important, you have already set up a stage for your re-emergence where everybody else is going to grow because of your growth, because of your stepping forward in a way and leading the way, instead of still staying stuck in, I can do this.
Right. That's the issue, isn't it? I think that's the kind of pathological problem with the society, is that we're conditioned to just push at all costs and not admit what feels like admitting, but actually it's just owning that's not going to work for this next phase of my life. Everything I did to get me to here, I was conditioned by the world, I was conditioned by capitalism, or whatever you want to call it, by the workplace, right? To be productive, as you say, to kind of generate money, to raise children, to provide these roles in society. And now menopause is coming, this tidal wave is coming, and I have to get real about who I am without these roles, what's being expected of me, what I'm expecting of myself. Because if I don't wise up now, life is going to come and knock me over, and I'm going to get spun in that wave, and I'm going to be another statistic. And what is the downside of that? Like, when a woman comes to you with symptoms, what are the most common symptoms that you see when she's been hit by that perimenopause or menopause, and she's not prepared, and she's not in the as you called it, transition? She's not with her own transition, it's just come to her.
Great question. So the things a very common pattern is just this feeling of desperation and lostness. And it may not be obvious. You may not look at the woman and think, there's a woman who's desperate and lost, but she's scrabbling up the rock face and her feet are hanging in space every day. And she's still doing the same things, Her energy's leaking, her confidence is failing. She doesn't have energy left at the end of the day for anything that would nourish her. A love life that she may have enjoyed, a romance, a hobby, things that she's loved to do seem to be, she keeps making excuses, but they slip further and further away until it's, I just got to get this done today, have a good sleep, if I can have a good sleep, and get through to the next day. So there's a sense of loss of power, loss of self-confidence, a drifting in the relationship. She's not providing the role or the elements to her relationship, perhaps with her partner, that she was, and she's feeling quite threatened and vulnerable around that. Very often that's significant. She knows that she's not showing up sexually, sensually, romantically. And I've also taught men about women going through this, and for them, very often, although they might not say so, nobody perhaps is articulating it, because actually nobody's sure. People are shocked when I say, well, you could be 44 or 45, you might think your menopause is like, oh, I'll be in my 60s, or no, that's just one day. Menopause is one day. Everything else is perimenopause, and you're going to start feeling that in your early mid-40s. So they're not articulating it because there's something wrong with a marriage and we don't want to talk about it. We can't see what it is because we've got the money coming in, we're in a good place. Men have reported to me, I've had men come up with tears in their eyes after I've lectured. I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought she didn't fancy me anymore. I thought she got a lover. Big, big gaps appear. Dangerous chasms appear. And it could be that one or the other of them has a fling, takes a lover, buys something ridiculous. There's sort of this separation can occur when there isn't this common understanding and this will of the woman to move into that and to find different ways of relating to a husband, a partner, or whatever, in ways that can be physical and emotional. So a sort of re-education and a new eroticism, I say, can really blossom in that time. And I find that a very important part of what I teach, to bring the partner, in a sense, in, but not so far in, because this is actually a deep time for her. And it's for her to get into her inner spaces, clean them out. From a tantric perspective, we talk about this being the time of Bagalamukhi, and re-articulate her wants and needs in a way that she's very fully heard and seen and visible, that makes other people want to serve her. So we flip the paradigm through the perimenopause transition to a woman who is actually served by the masculine, and I don't mean men, of course, but by the masculine structures in her life, by her partner suddenly seeing her as the fullness of her being and wanting to help her fulfill her desires, because he is actually programmed to do that. He's at his best when he's not protecting this weak thing, he's protecting this strong blossom thing that is, by his nature, even if he doesn't talk about it, he understands is the bringer of the creative force to the planet. And that turns him on in a whole different way.
So there's a promise there, really, with what I'm hearing, between the deepening of the relationship with the self, then mirroring into the deepening of the relationship with the other. But you've touched on a couple of times this idea of going within. Let's imagine there's a woman listening to this in her 40s, and she's thinking, well, this is all very nice, but what do you mean going within? Or I am feeling a lot of chaos and storming inside, and I feel a bit lost or a bit desperate or a bit like I'm scrabbling. And where do I start with this going within? Because when I go within, I just think of my to-do list. I just think of, you know, Kat, it's all very nice saying connect with your intuition, but actually I'm busy right now. And I'm maybe a lot of mums probably have just finished lots of homeschooling and barely had a break. So, Gail, bless you. Yeah, feel free to ask questions in the chat as well. But that's the sort of, I think, so important to what I'm hearing you say. Like the way through the tsunami is catching your breath and going within so that you can navigate this new time in your life. But what if someone doesn't really know what that even means or involves? Could you talk us through that?
I would. The first thing is not to talk about this initially as though you've got to go and sit and meditate for half an hour a day. And that might not be ideal for you, particularly if you're still feeling a lot of chaos. Sitting there meditating is just going to drive you nuts. You'll be wondering why you aren't standing up doing a job. So one of the first things is to stand back and take a long, hard look at, well, some very prosaic things, the 3 Ds, as I call it. Do it, dump it, or delegate it. So I have a 3 piece exercise that I do with the family where, let's just take it, the left-hand column, you write down everything that needs to be done to make that family run, everything, not just putting out the bins, not just paying the council tax, every little thing, ringing the dentist, and you do that for yourself initially. And it's a freaking long list. And then in the next column, you just tick or check who currently does this task. And in the last column, you leave that blank. You can put up who else could do this task. And you have the 3 Ds above there. It's a check. Do we do it? Do we dump it? Or do we delegate it? And when a woman completes that task, very often she begins to get a real good look about how much is put on her plate, and come back to that question, would you go and give this job to somebody else and expect them to accomplish it and still have a personal life? Is that reasonable? Just because you're you and you're busy and you've got it covered, does that make it right? Is that a good life work balance for anybody? And why should you be different to anybody? Why shouldn't you enjoy that? Because what tends to happen is we keep taking stuff on and we don't get stuff off. And while that dynamic's happening, our children are growing and we take on perhaps more for them. I don't know, we're in very peculiar times. But even within that, the 3 Ds kind of stands, it's a very good cleansing exercise to look at how you've positioned yourself, where you've put your ladder in life at this moment, and what that really means.
Why women are feeling so stuck, I think, and overwhelmed. At least it helps you realize, yes, I'm feeling overwhelmed because look what's on my plate. Of course,
exactly.
Anyone would be overwhelmed.
Anyone will be overwhelmed, and that's a really good place to sit and look at yourself. Look what's happening. It's normal. I'm not actually cracking up, although of course the whole exhaustion, adrenals, ovaries and things gets really impacted by this doing too much. And that it might be a discussion today, it might be a discussion another day. But while we continue blindly on that path, we're draining our life force, we're draining our jing. When we pull our adrenals down, we really interrupt the process by which the adrenal glands and the ovaries have a conversation about how they can make a little bit of estradiol to keep just enough to keep us going. Well, if we're pulling on our adrenals the whole time, not only are we preventing that happening, we can throw the thyroid, we can create autoinflammation kind of things because of the stress hormone we're constantly creating. So it's not even a nice to do exercise. It's like, come on, you're damaging yourself. If you're working this hard and you're so stressed, do you know what's happening to your central nervous system? Do you know how to get your vagus nerve to relax you? Do you know what the long-term effect of this could be? You're going to get sick and you're going to be a frazzled mess for anybody that you love. So stand up, have a good look at it and ask really hard questions. Don't go, oh no, we couldn't possibly, or we do need that new car, or no, we absolutely have to have this house. It doesn't mean that, sorry, I was going to say, it doesn't mean that's a change forever. It's just about what's needed now.
This is such a good exercise, but I can also feel the resistance to doing it. And I know that you're like on the Eden Room, obviously we are really working with women around their well-being and around them, as we said, receiving those dreams and becoming who they're meant to become. And I loved what you said earlier about how did you say that? You said becoming who we're meant to become is about building on who we've already been. Is that how you said it?
Yeah, pretty close.
I'd love you to say that again, because what I want to offer to anyone watching, because, you know, Debs, there's a million questions I still want to ask you. Unfortunately, we've got you through the year with the Eden Room. So we're going to set up like a show where people can kind of have this surgery with you, Q&As, come and see you, open surgery, get their questions answered and their needs met in the Eden Room. And I feel like this exercise you're describing is so powerful, but I also think it's one of those ones we're going to need some hand holding to actually do it. And so if you're up for it, I think one of your first shows, and we'll put the schedule up for anyone who's a member and wants to join us, we could actually sit and do this exercise together with a group, with that group support, with that collective energy. And it ties really nicely to an exercise I do with my coaching clients, which is around the gray zone and the gift zone, the things you love doing and the things you actually want to be showing up for, the passions and the creative hobbies and the ways in which you just come alive and feel good, and all the gray zone stuff, which I think women of any age find themselves massively weighed down and held back by the domestic stuff. Because what immediately comes up to me is people listening to this and saying, well, that's all very well, but what if I'm in a job, how am I just going to say, oh, I'm transitioning now into menopause and you all have to be prepared for it? I think we need to really work with our community more about these conversations. And because there's, what I've learned about women is there's this magical thing that happens. And I'd love us to, just before we go, feel into the possibilities now. We've talked quite a lot about the symptoms and the problems and the pain, and I think we could go on forever about the pain that women are in quietly underneath the surface. You know, it's something there. But let's change the lens, and you're a big believer in putting your energy where you want your reality to go towards and focusing on what you do want. Let's discuss how this can look and the opportunity of midlife and menopause for this blossoming and this, what I see in you, this great power and this preparation for power that we're taking women through. So anyone watching, there's going to be more on this, and we will do a actual circle, I think, Debs, where we almost workshop this exercise, if you're up for leading that, so that women can face the tiger and look at that, stare it in the eye, and we can work through some of the fears. If that sounds good, let us know in the chat if that sounds good. And then yeah, so Debs, what can we look forward to? What's the promise of your work and how this could change women's perspective on menopause and how their future is going to look?
Well, the promise of this work is that you have an opportunity to birth aspects of yourself that are waiting in your soul. They're archetypes that you don't even know yet, and you can't know them in the old way. You have to journey to them. I call it the walk of faith and fire. And the promise of that is that as you begin to embody these archetypal senses that live in your soul, you create a new frequency, a new vibration in your body. And it does actually have to implant through the endocrine system, which is why we have to start at the beginning and get everything ready. When that happens, you are in a different reality than you have been. It doesn't mean that you're with different people necessarily, although that's often a sign that you are. It means that you start to access different states of consciousness. You live from a different place. You live from a more at peace place, not peaceful, and a more fulfilled place. There's a lot of sensuality comes with it because your soul's really humming through your endocrine system now. You have a very clear yes and no, which is incredibly liberating and freeing. you've stepped outside the paradigm, and you build your own paradigm, and magically, because of your vibratory rate and your connection through the Kundalini and through the Earth Star chakra to the grid of the earth, she can do no more than mirror the vibratory rates that you're holding, and brings you magical surprises. You start to live a very real magic. The trust levels that you have in the way things work, or even more particularly the way things go wrong, you realize they're all a gift, and you wait for the gift to show itself, and bang, another amazing thing, another amazing connection, another amazing day. Instead of stressing and trying to push it all into a box and move it around so it fits with your schedule, you go from what I call, it's like you go through the Alice through the looking glass process. So in one side of your Alice life, it's I do this so that I can have that, and then I'll be, do, have, be, do, have, be. I'll do this so I can have a bit of peace, and then I'll be happy. I'll be quiet. I'll get my energy back. We have to go through a transition, which is through the Chiron point. So I'm throwing some astrology here. And guys, if you want to hear more about that, there's plenty of wealth on that I've got to share. And when we move into this different vibratory rate, when we clear, if you like, the energetic ties and paradigms of the 3 lower chakras, lower is not good or bad, they're very important. They're so important, in fact, that we need to understand how to monitor and manage them so they keep generating for us, but we don't want them clogged and we don't want them leaking. When we get into this new place, we start to be. Our predominant way of living is being. And because our trust in that is so amazing, that means that we get to have the things that we most need. They might not be what you think they are, but they are absolutely right for you when they arrive. And then we can do what our soul wants us to do. It's Dharma. You live a Dharmic life. And the promise of that is that you stop any sense of feeling held back, limited, crushed, older. That just goes. It's not even a thought anymore. That battle's gone. You're living in your own gifts and talents. You're living with your own vision. You're not anti anything. You're just pro you and the way you want to take your energy, and you keep pulling out more energy and more energy because you know how.
Debs, there's just so much. I mean, I really want us to keep going, and I know I also want to honor and respect your time, because I know you've got an important lunch date. But we're so blessed that we get to continue this conversation and this journey, and I really can feel the magic of that, of working with you for over time. And how, so we're going to be sharing this in Eden Room, and we're going to take people through these next few seasons, right, through the summer and into the autumn and into winter. It's going to be beautiful. If anyone is really struggling right now and needs to connect with you directly, can they reach out and do that? Is there capacity that you've got right now for mentoring, if anyone is just really feeling like, actually, this is something I need support around at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Kat. I'm always open for 3 or 4 conversations a week, depending on my itinerary. Whether women work with me or not, that conversation is part of my Dharma. And yes, they can reach out and they can do the usual thing, find a gap, come along, and I guarantee that they will be listened to, they will be fully seen and heard, and I will offer at least one thing that I know that if they do that thing, it's going to start a domino effect in their life. Of those conversations, my work is now under the umbrella of the Temple of Shiva. So it's a very initiatory, year-long progress. We don't actually hammer it for a year, of course, but it's for certain women will feel the vibration of that, and they'll know that's who I need to be. I can feel her, I can't see her. How do I get there? Well, that's a mystery. We're working with the mysteries. So yes, they can reach out. I'll willingly have a conversation just for love, and there are always, at this point of the year, I've got 2 more gaps, and then I'll have the summer to fulfill that, and then we'll start looking at what autumn's going to bring in and what women need to come in the temple and receive the wisdom of Athena and the overseeing of the Queen of Sheba.
Mm-hmm.
And comes through it.
And it is so magical. And I think that's what that's the promise, this idea that we've been stuck in this paradigm of if you do, then you can have, and then that thing that you have is going to make you happy. You'll be happy. You're going to be fulfilled. Well, I love hearing what you're saying. You're going to help these women go through the Alice, go through the looking glass. And we're going to have some transformational experiences, I know, within the Eden Room. It's going to be amazing. And then this being, and then receiving what is meant for you, and then being able to do and live your Dharma, and the organic and effortless sense of that. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. I think it takes a huge amount of courage. And that's something I love about you, Debs, is you're so powerfully yourself. You know, and some people might be thinking, what does she mean, Queen of Sheba? Because that's the thing that we got thrown around as children, that it was almost like a crazy negative thing, right? Like, oh, she thinks she's the Queen of Sheba. You know, it doesn't even mean anything to us anymore, which is a lesson in itself. It's like we've had so many of these archetypes destroyed or taken away or defiled. Like witches just meant wise woman, literally translated. Goddesses, you know, this, that, and the other. It's all been a little bit diminished or sidelined or defiled.
Who am I to say Temple of Sheba? Who am I to say that? Well, I'm me, and I was told via a dream, build a Temple of Sheba, build it. And I've got beyond myself where I actually question that. So I did.
And you've had incredible results with the ladies that are going through those initiations, and they are going through the looking glass, and they are getting on the other side of this feeling of loss and desperation. And so I'm very hopeful for this continued conversation for women in midlife, with people like yourself in the world, and with the expansion around, I think, all of us coming into realizations of where we've marginalized ourselves. It was something that you said right at the beginning, and I want to end on it today because I think it's really important that we leave women with this sense of empowerment. We're so afraid of everybody out there calling us crazy. We've done such a good job of adapting to the world. You said the issue is this, but it's also that we submit to it. Can you end today by sharing your perspective on that, and how we can, if as women, become more conscious of what we've maybe been tolerating or allowing to control us, and how we can powerfully prepare ourselves to really step into this magical, empowered woman in midlife that you so beautifully embody for us?
Thank you. It's a very graceful compliment. I accept that with my whole heart. Ask a question. What if there's another way? What if this was a gift? And even though your whole person will be struggling with that, but I won't be able to do this and I can't do that. And listen to that chatter and say, what if that wasn't true? What if that conversation that Kat and Debs had was just a little inkling, a tiny little light that said, well, maybe there is. What would that do for me? Could it free me of some of the pain I'm feeling now? Even just a little bit of relief right now, to think that maybe rushing to a solution isn't in my best long-term interests. What is it that when I pick up, let's say, a magazine, or consider how I'm going to fix my lines, or I'm not saying everybody does that, but I'm going to guess quite a few people do. If I can catch myself in that moment, what am I really feeling? What do I think I'm about to lose? And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm saying use that as an exercise in holding up a mirror to yourself and saying, what am I really afraid of? And if I can face that, what emotion am I most afraid of? If I can face that question in myself, as I stand here and look at these magazines, and yes, there are beautiful older role models, but let's face it, they're getting a pretty good chunk of amazing support. I did my journey on no money, effectively. You know, there wasn't anything spent on it in that sense. What if I'm actually secretly driving myself in circles because I'm afraid that I won't be desirable, lovable, I won't be able to get my dreams? What if I actually face the fact there's a very scared part of me operating here? Yeah.
And that my power is such that I will prove that true. My power is such that the thoughts I think about myself, those ugly places I don't want to look, I will make them real in my reality, because that's the actual freedom we've been given as creators.
Yeah.
So if we believe it, then it's pretty much what we're going to experience. And that's this tricky part, which is what I see you shifting for women. When they step through the looking glass, it's actually about them recognizing, I am making this whole thing up. And if I believe that about myself and about my menopause, that's exactly what I'm going to experience. But I've got an opportunity now with this work and with this wisdom to rewire how I think about myself, about the menopause, and create a completely different narrative that is non-linear, and where I'm actually like more productive, because I'm not trying to be productive in this linear way anymore. I'm accepting my power, that there's this multi-dimensional way of allowing so much more into my experience than I've even been aware of before now.
Absolutely. And just to close, I will say there's a technology behind that. It's not just mind and body in isolation. There's a technology waiting to support you to do that. And you move to a more magnetic way of being. And I don't just mean that in terms of allure. I mean that in terms of your electromagnetic body construction. You can get more by doing less.
And that is the technology that you, in your Dharma, is to share with the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. I know how that baby rocks.
Yeah. And we're so blessed. Thank you, Debs. Well, I'm going to leave it there, but I really want to take a moment to honor you. I really want to thank you for the grace that you emit and have brought to this work and to the Eden Room today. And I know it was a bit of a teething conversation today, and thank you for being so patient with all the technology. But I think from now on, we'll probably just do these on Zoom, and we will let the ladies know that we're going to have this safe space with you. I think it's once a fortnight we decided on in the end. And I'm excited to feel that momentum building, and for us all should be going through the looking glass together with this.
Absolutely. I'll come back on the other side and bring you with me. That's my absolute joy. I feel it too. I really feel excited, and as though I'm now helping to create women that one part of my dream is that women of your age are going to pass on a very different picture to their daughters, their nieces, their sons, their sisters. I want to break this for once and for all and take us back to something much more meaningful, because the planet needs the wisdom of women who are able to give ample wisdom more than ever at this time. We need it.
We so need this. We so need this. Thank you, Debs. When people want to connect with you and find out more, where should they come to find you?
The quickest place is Facebook, where I'm there under Debs de Vries Holistic Menopause Mentor. I have a group on Facebook which is called the Midlife and Perimenopause Wisdom Collective. So they're two quick hop on, find me places. There are others, but that's a good place to start.
A good place to start. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed this, everybody. We look forward to welcoming Debs back again. Keep an eye on the Eden Room for updates of her upcoming events. And Debs, thank you so much. Have a beautiful afternoon. Enjoy your lunch, and I look forward to speaking with you again really, really soon.
Thank you, Kat. I'm looking forward to what's coming.
Me too. Lots of love.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.